spending time learning something new is spending time doing something that you're really good at, for example, already. And so there's part of you that's trying to tell you, like, is it really worth putting yourself in that position to try something new and to really, like, potentially fail it if you could do something else on the side? The human component, at least in creating novel art or creating novel content, is always going to be present. And because I would encourage people not to see necessarily the AI tools as the replacement. It's the tool. It's what enables people to do certain things a lot faster.
The writings that you're doing right now is fully related to music, because music has been a big part. Anyway, I'll let you tell the story. I don't want to speak for you, so please tell me why, how, and where do you see it going?
Here we go, baby.
Here we are. Karim, welcome to the Dom's Dance Court podcast, season 2.
Thank you. I'm so excited. You have no idea how excited I've been to be here.
You don't know how badly I've been wanting to get you here. Wow. We've crossed paths a couple times already this past year.
A few times already.
But we haven't been able to make it work, so we finally did. How does it feel?
It feels fantastic. It's on the backhand of a trip that kind of happened last minute, but I'm very happy I'm here.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we're able to make this kind of spontaneously work. I'm a little nervous. I don't know what we're going to go towards, what we're going to, talk about. We've had deep conversations in the past about any and all things, but this is like the first time doing it in front of potentially other people, maybe one or two other people. I don't know how many are going to watch it, but
yeah, it's different. It's different when it's recorded, but you forget about it after a while. You'll see, like at the beginning, it feels like you know what you're doing, and then after a while, it becomes normal. And you're saying you don't know where we're going. Nobody knows, not even me. That's the beauty of it.
I have a feeling that it's going to get better over time because we're drinking this little thing right here. That's a little bit spiked, man.
Just a little bit. Tell the people where we're going tonight.
We're going to a festival called Calorama, which I have no idea what it is, but apparently there's some great artists there.
Also very last minute decision.
Very last minute decision. These guys have the VIP tickets. Sadly, I'm not quite at the height of it, but no, I'm excited to go see Fol Amour. Is that what we're going to see?
That's one. I mean, we were not so the reason. So your brother. So just for context, Karim is my other cousin, Jad's brother. So if people have seen Jad's podcast last season, and they know Jad from the social medias, they'll know you too. And I always talk about how a big part of my life and my personality is the music element, the festivals, and you and Jad are part of I'd say the consistent festival squad that we rotate with. No?
Dude, for sure. It's been, I guess we've been doing festivals. The last one I remember where we officially scheduled the festival plan was the
Barcelona?
Barcelona?
That was the latest one, wasn't it?
The latest one, but the first one I'm talking about.
Which
first
one?
ones. I think it was Governor's Ball in New York. No.
Yes, where we missed the flight and we missed Leon Bridges, which led us to go in M3F where we met Hannah.
Exactly, and then from there on we did. I think in 2022 alone we did 5-6 concerts. 2023 maybe 10 concerts, something crazy.
Yeah, we did. And one thing that's cool is that you come to so many for these. Like you came to Montreal for Justin Bieber. We watched Justin.
Gosh, that was 2021 or 22.
I don't remember.
I believe. Right. I think that was the year where we had a lot of concerts.
And it got rescheduled 3 times, remember?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
But we saw Justin, we saw actually so many together. We've seen Jungle 4 times.
We've seen Jungles a bunch of times. Well, actually, I think I saw Jungle once with you guys. I saw Jungle another time in Portola, in San Francisco, the same year.
Right.
Where
M3F?
We saw M3F, exactly. So 6 months later. It's funny, the two festivals are M3F was definitely smaller, a little bit more intimate in the scale of festivals, right? Portola was this gigantic, huge thing scheduled on on one of the ports in San Francisco, and very kind of edgy industrial vibe. But the artists on both of them were exceptional. Yeah. M3F had some of the best artists ever.
And the one we're going to tonight reminds me of M3F from that perspective. Okay, it seems very indie, not as indie as the one we went to, but very low key. Very low, already going to get the wristbands and stuff. They made them seem as if it's going to be so not so sold out and not so full, which I love. But there's pretty big artists. There's Jungle is really big right now, and they're going to be there. There's Peggy Goo.
When's Peggy Goo playing?
Saturday. Okay. It's a shame you're not here for that one. That was honestly the only reason we're going Saturday was because of Jungle, And sure, for Peggy,
Right.
it's okay. We don't care too much. I mean, I want to say we don't
We
care.
saw her a few weeks ago already, or like a month ago.
Oh, in
at,
Barcelona, yeah.
exactly.
And it wasn't incredible.
It was good. It was good. It was what I remember. Zad was saying that like apparently at Coachella she wasn't that great or something.
But
like
he
that.
saw her in Montreal and he said she was
in
great.
Montreal, maybe.
So I have
okay.
faith that in smaller venues and stuff. 'Cause
Possibly.
think about Barcelona. She had the really big stage. She was the main stage.
True.
Tomorrow, just like Jungle and just like Folamour tonight, it's not the big stage.
Yeah, nice.
How weird is that? How is?
I mean, it's
I think
cool.
they're underestimating how big Jungle is.
Perhaps, maybe, I don't know. I wonder if they like if the artists how much thought they put into it. I mean, obviously there's a commercial aspect to it, right? They want to go to the bigger stages because they're bigger artists. But I don't know. I'd be curious at some point to like. I would love to get to a point where I can talk to some of these artists that I admire a lot. You know, I've been writing a newsletter about artists.
Yeah,
and
I was going to
artists
ask you
that
about that.
together, and it's been a way for me to reconnect with sort of my musical side that's been in me and in all our family for a long time. But there's so many of these things around kind of how like the dynamics of music writing, of going on tour, on how do you know the business side of it, which is very interesting in terms of how they decide how to fund and how to kind of move forward with their projects, but also you know purely from a creative perspective, right? Like what's exciting, what excites an artist better? Is it those huge stages where they feel like they're in front of the whole world, or is it when they're in the more intimate settings where they feel like they have more of a connection with the crowd? So
What's your guess?
probably depends on artists. That's what I'd be very curious as to is to kind of guess or like talk to the specific artists, right? I could see, for instance, I was listening to to the release, like the Twitch video of Disclosure's release of the album Energy, because I'm writing a newsletter on it.
Beautiful.
Subscribe and get ready for the next one. And it's super fun. It's just the two brothers. Like drinking beer over beer. One of them, I think, Howard was just like drinking like some gin drink or something, like just getting like drunk basically online, and talking about how they produced the album, how they met with a lot of the collaborators. There are people like Channel Trace. There was Kalani was one of the songs, and for me, it really struck me like that these guys would probably love an intimate concert or like an intimate venue where like they can interact with the audience, because I remember during the recording, Twitch allows you to like look at comments that people are writing and stuff like that, and they were like taking the time to respond to comments, and they were like bouncing on one of the things that people were saying dumb shit and they're just like responding to it. So I feel like they would be the kind of people who'd be a lot more into kind of maybe like the more intimate venues. I don't know, I'd guess maybe some bigger artists. I would see Peggy Goo being more into like the sort of huge, like gigantic, massive artists.
That's what it seems like.
Who knows, you know, like some
we don't
DJs
know.
really appreciate getting close. Others feel like they want to, you know, share the music with the world, and both are valuable.
Man, I feel like same with Jungle. When we first discovered Jungle, they weren't so big, so we were discovering and seeing them in the small. Like even the first time we ever saw them in Phoenix, they were how small of a stage was that? Pretty intimate.
It was pretty intimate, and then we saw them at their private concert afterwards. You remember? The same night. They were putting together. They had a DJ set.
Oh,
and we actually saw them walking out of it like.
We did.
Little club thing. Yeah,
we forgot about that.
And now that I'm remembering it, like it's crazy. Like, we were so close to
because they were not that big.
Yeah, they were like, and there was.
They really blew up this year, huh?
Crazy
with Volcano. But it's such an interesting thing. So you feel like, is that why you think like walk me through how you got into writing again? Because for those who don't know, the writings that you're doing right now is fully related to music, because music has been a big part. Anyway, I'll let you tell the story. I don't want to speak for you, so please tell me why, how, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, listen. So it started out very organically in the sense where you know that very well, and probably the people listening know that very well. I'm a big fan of L'Impératrice. I have a huge crush on Flore Benguigui. Flore, if you're listening to this, I'd love to take you out one day. I promise you won't be bored. But
that's one thing for sure. She won't be bored.
She won't be bored. That's for sure. I don't know what else she will be, but at least not bored. No. So her and her band released an album this year called Pulsar, and it was the first one in a couple of years, and so I was very excited about it. And I don't know, you know, like there's these, like I like to describe and I like to put words into the emotions that I feel around a lot of experiences, and music in particular is the cool one where it's like a mix of so many mediums of expression between the music itself, between the lyrics, between kind of the visuals that they put there together. And I don't know, I got this sort of wave of inspiration, feeling very strongly about each of the songs. And beyond that, it's funny because I think for me it's also a way just to share some of that passion. It reminds me of one of the newsletters that you wrote not long ago about sharing, and it's not just kind of putting it on display, but also inviting people to participate in that experience, in the listening experience, in trying to think of what that makes them feel, and also feeling like I have, building a sort of community around me of people who I know and I appreciate. And one of the things I like the most is like getting into an exciting conversation like the one we're having around stuff that I like, stuff that I feel are cool, and hearing what you like. And then whenever you vibe with someone is when you feel like you have a lot of things in common, right? And so my thought was like, look, I mean, I like all of that stuff. I don't know, like, if I were to have a one-on-one conversation with every person that I know about this album, we would have like hours conversations, and probably some of them would be bored. So I'm like, all right, let's try to condense that into something that's a bit more digestible. And I was inspired by your newsletters, obviously. I felt like it was also a safe space inside of like the family and the people that we know to get the feedback out of it and just to be able to experiment. And so I started with the first one around, I think it was June of this year, and May, early June, so not long ago. And then I mean, it was a super fun experience. It was it was great to kind of play around with the way that I think of music and then expressing it. It was really cool also to research the artists, get to know them a little bit better that way. Like I have this scientific approach around the thing that I want to write in the work that I do, where I want to marry the emotional and sort of the subjective aspect with hard, cold facts and research around things. And I feel sometimes maybe that's my shortcoming, but we glance upon some of these things, and especially with the massive information available online, sometimes we glance over really interesting details about an art and an artist in favor of things like, I don't know, gossip or other elements of their lives that don't really matter to the artistry, in my opinion. So I wanted to try to kind of package a lot of these thoughts, put it all together into a digestible form of content. It was also fun to practice writing again. I like it a lot. I don't get the chance to do it in a kind of fun format as much as I would like to at work. You have to be very careful about the language you use and about what you express. Here I could just like let it free. And so I've published 3 so far. There's a 4th in the works. It's taking a bit of time. I think I'm getting to the point, we'll probably have an offline conversation on that around it, where like I get that here and with a few other experiences where there's the initial excitement about doing something new and it's super cool, and so you get to it. And then at some point that excitement dies down, and you're left with having to make the choice or reflecting upon whether that's something that you want to keep doing because you're really excited about it, or whether it's something that's just not quite for you. And I think I'm at that plateau here where like I can see things like, when you have a little bit of that writer's block where you don't really know how you can really get inspired to write stuff, and also a bit of that pressure that I want to put on myself and on my writing, even though it's just a small newsletter, but like of doing a really good job of something that's really well written, well researched. And so it's a fun exercise into starting something new and then pushing yourself past the discomfort level of what happens past the initial excitement and really starting to build a skill. So that's what I'm excited about, and really committing to doing that. I was telling your brother Jamie earlier that I want to get to at least 10 of those at the very least before thinking of like kind of growing it or doing anything more out of it, but really just like making that habit, getting past that phase where it's like a bit painful and difficult, and really like absorbing as much of the learning as I can from the experience.
Let me ask you a question. Why did you start it in the first place?
For fun. I mean, fun. It was a cool experience. It was also, it felt like I said, like part of it is also seeing you as an example and other people who like producing content so easily in the sense where with little pressure, with little expectations around it. And it was quite freeing to see you and Jamie, and like I look at you guys a lot because you're very inspiring on that perspective of you guys are really willing to put yourself out there a lot more than what I was willing to do at your age. I have a lot of these conversations with my millennial friends, but we have a love-hate relationship with you guys' generation, the Gen Zs, where like we're impressed and at the same time annoyed. And actually The Economist, very renowned journal, talked about that exact symptom at work, where a lot of older generation professionals are very frustrated by Gen Zs, not because they're lazy or they don't work hard or any of these prejudices, but because they're mostly very right. And I think there's something that happened in your generation, maybe with the access of internet, maybe with this sort of democratization of knowledge all over, that broke certain barriers in the way that we express ourselves. And I've seen you, your brother, and a few others, and like a lot of people that I know about your generation who are much less shy to just say what they think. And that makes for very open and honest communications. In the workplace, it also makes for people who say things as they are, and so they're usually right. There's no politics involved. There's no like weird kind of misunderstandings around it, and it could be frustrating or off-putting at first. But at least in my case, it was like, wow, well, I mean, why don't I do, like, what's the difference between me and you guys in terms of like, I mean, I'm not, what's my reputation? I don't really have like, I'm not like the president of whatever kind of thing. It doesn't really matter. And even then, what am I doing? I'm writing about something that I'm passionate about. You know, what's the worst that can happen?
Who's going to fault you for that?
Exactly.
No, but I think it's so, I mean, so many points that you touched on that firstly, you're so well spoken and it's so beautiful. I already know this, but it's beautiful to have it in a recorded format for other people to experience that too, which is why many of the reasons why I even started this podcast was to have others experience the people that I get to experience and that I love. And you're one of those. And, I love the idea. Firstly, I want to tackle the other aspect where you started talking about like how you had so much fun and you start a project and you have all this initial, or we can call it the honeymoon phase, as you would in a relationship, right? Exactly. And why do we as humans suddenly not continue it? Why do we stop? And it's because a lot of, they call it the shiny object syndrome, I think is what it's called. I could be completely wrong. I wish we had Jamie to fact check here. But I think essentially and the reason why I thought it's called that is because it's something that attracts you, it's shiny, and then you get to it, and then before you know it, you moved on to the next shiny thing. Because you're just
right.
That's why I think that's what it is. And that's what happens to a lot of people. Why do you think a lot of people are not succeeding in the ways they want to? Is because they try 1,000 things and then they just don't stick to one. When sometimes sticking it out is what allows you to succeed at that one thing, right? How are you going to succeed at one thing if you keep moving and trading? So to tell you though that I agree, and that when you sometimes do one thing, like in this case, then let's take the example of the newsletter. It's okay to take a break and recalibrate. You know, like I was thinking about me with the podcast. I had heard the fact once that I think I don't know the percentage, but under an X amount of percentage, very low percentage of people who have podcasts have passed the 20th episode. And me, my first season, I had done 12 episodes only. And then I stopped. I took a 2-month break.
I see.
It wasn't because I didn't want to continue. It's because probably part of the shiny object was over. The honeymoon phase kind of ended. So all the excitement around it kind of ended. But also because I was focusing on other things.
Right.
So there's seasons to life and things that happen. And I think it's okay to take that break as long as you commit to come back to it. And that's, now we're talking about commitment here. It's if you can make the time for yourself to always keep that promise. If you, again, you said you're doing it because it's fun. You said you're doing it because it connects you back to your passion of music. It lets you organize your thoughts. It lets you write freely. You know, you're connecting back to that source that brings you intrinsic joy. So in a way, what's gonna stop you from not doing something that brings you actual joy? Nothing. At the end of the day, it's you against yourself.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I know it's much easier said than done, and I get it. I get it 100%. That, I mean, again, I told you I've had it with the podcast. Happily, very happily so. I haven't had it with the writing. Like I've not missed.
Right.
And I don't say that to compare myself to you in any way. It's more of like.
No, but I was actually talking about something very similar to Jimmy that day. But I think it's just as valuable to pay attention to these differences in your experience with any and all kinds of media, right? Like whether if you're talking about particularly creating and stuff like that, right? It doesn't invalidate your other point. I think on the contrary, it reinforces the fact that there are certain things potentially that come naturally that feel a little easier to go for, or that you just practice a lot more. Like you've been writing, 50 newsletters, 60 newsletters at this point?
It's going to be a year in November.
Yeah, so it's been like, I remember when you passed the 40 newsletter cap about a month or two ago. You've been writing a ton of those. So I'm guessing you probably went past the shiny phase.
Maybe, but I'm trying to think of it because I did with other things, and I'm thinking with writing I have as well. But again, like I have periods, like in the past 2 weeks because we were on holidays, we were traveling, and I was focusing. And like the past, ever since I've started signing paying clients, I've given my full attention to that. So I've had to give some things on the back burner, such as the podcast. That was one of the reasons why the podcast stopped operating, was because I was devoting so much time to this new aspect of my business.
Now, so how did you pick it back up again?
Well, now I kind of recalibrated, allowed myself to sit down with what do I really want? Do I want to keep doing this or not? That was one thing I had to ask myself. It's like, did I enjoy it? I kind of asked myself the question I asked you. Why did I start it in the first place? And kind of bringing myself back to the why of it all, which is kind of your purpose, was enough to be like, I really did enjoy it. And there's so many more guests I want to talk to. I was like, man, imagine I have a podcast and I didn't even get Karim. Like, you know, and no jokes aside, like,
I would have been heartbroken.
I was heartbroken. Like I know, but genuinely, because that's what I mean. And then for the writing, you're saying like, I definitely had a phase where there's times I have no clue what to write about. You're talking about writer's block. One thing I've noticed is you can really write about anything, which is what you're talking about stuff. And for you, it's perhaps, I don't think it's harder because you have a box about music. You can always find something to tie it in, right? If you remember mine initially started being about music as well. Not in the way you're doing them, but yours, the good news of yours as well is because right now you're writing about music reviews and how the music impacts you and taking us through a journey of the album with you. You have a million albums, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of content out there for music, but
and it's incredible, so it's never ending. But I mean, it's cool. I think it's so cool that you're writing again. What's the thing you like the most about writing again? What do you feel that?
Honestly, it's like it's gonna sound a little corny or stupid, but it's like I like to make myself laugh when I write dumb shit.
Yeah,
it kind of sounds stupid, but it's like, or it's this the humoristic aspect of it. It's being able to write something that's light, that's funny, that's gonna get people to, hopefully to laugh, but to also think about it and to see, like, I don't know. For me, humor is a great way to convey meaning and emotion very deeply, and to convey a sense of intelligence as well. I feel like it's not easy to make good humor unless you're really thoughtful about what you're trying to convey and trying to describe.
Gotcha.
So I like to think of like how to make this engaging and funny and people that like, tickles their brain in addition to just tickling them like kind of physically.
Which you do, right? You do. Like I
try.
You're
I try.
very.
I give myself a crack, so I don't know.
You're a great writer. I'll tell you what, but for sure, like, and I would love to put in the description of the podcast anyway your letter for them to subscribe. But
sure thing.
You're such a good writer, and like you said yourself, at the end, the more you do it, the more you're going to build that writing muscle.
Right.
Which is like I told Jamie, it's going to serve you for everything in life. At the end, writing is a skill that I think one is irreplaceable. Like, yes, you have all the AIs and this can write for you, but there's something different about writing from a human perspective. Like you said, you can attach energy, feeling. You can really do things because I was hearing from copywriters that they're having a lot of people telling them that they don't need their business anymore because they can just use robots and AI for it. And I don't know if there's something about that makes sense, but the other part of it that just to me is you can't get rid of that human element. Just the robot will not be able to replicate.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
It's funny to talk about AI because it's obviously a big topic.
Always, yeah.
It's kind of stuff that there's a lot on my mind because I'm an engineer from that perspective. I think you're 100% right in the fact that the human component, at least in creating novel art or creating novel content, is always going to be present. And because I would encourage people not to see necessarily the AI tools as the replacement. It's the tool. It's what enables people to do certain things a lot faster. And I've experimented with certain things in AI, and now that I think about it, maybe I'll try to do a few things with my newsletter there. But like, one of my biggest kind of side project goals that I've been trying to put together was to build what I would call a Karim GPT. It's basically a thing where I could give it the newsletters, I could give it some like email extracts, some journaling that I put in the past, everything that I've written with my voice and my tone, feed that into the algorithm, and have it talk on my behalf. And that doesn't mean that it's replacing me. On the contrary, it cannot exist without
you.
It cannot exist without my content. It cannot exist without my own voice. If anything, what I feel AI is trying to, or is helping us push to do, which is, if you can make a parallel with like when we went from the typewriter to the computer, back then only typists could write stuff. So not only did you have to have creativity to be able to write things, but you had to also train on a typing machine, which is super annoying to use, which is very error prone. It takes you forever, and so some people would just like give up on it. Now you can argue that there's a learning curve that's necessary for people to feel very committed, right? It's just like saying, if you want to apply for the best school in the world, you have to do the SATs, and SATs are not a great proxy on how good you'll be at life, but it's a proof that you're committing to studying hard to eventually go somewhere. You can argue that a typewriter was that too, but also there's a lot of people who just either weren't very dexterous with their fingers, didn't want to spend hours of their time trying to understand a machine that didn't do what they were asking them to do. And so here's the same kind of concept, is that we're leveling the playing field for a lot of people who might not be able or might not have the ability to craft perfectly phrased languages, who might not have the patience to do it, who might have not had the opportunity, right? We're lucky we've been in schools that educate us and then push us to write a lot and to do a lot of that thing, and that even gives us techniques. But you can imagine people who haven't had that chance to do that, but who have great ideas, who want to convey them, who want to put themselves out there, and who want to share their craft with people. AI can probably help them do that in many different ways, so long as you can kind of use it, and so long as we remain conscious as, individuals using it in a society, that the AI is kind of the intermediate. It's not the source of that intelligence. It can replicate it, it can mimic it really well, it can even give us the impression that it does better than us, and probably in certain tasks it does. But I think in terms of writing or art or creating novel content, we'll always need humans who can think outside the box, who can instill some of their passion and their personality into the AI. And then if the AI does a better job to, package it nicely, then for sure. Like, I know that I'm a terrible drawer, for example. Like, I draw like crap. So I'm not going to try to, draw a caricature of someone if I draw like shit, right? I would ask someone to do it, or I would, take an AI and I'd give it a prompt to do it. And that's fine. It's still my drawing. It's still sort of my original thoughts.
That's so interesting. That's a beautiful way to see it, actually. And I mean, I feel like it's the correct way to see it. It's not there to replace you. It's there to complement you. And it's cool. It cannot live without you. So it's cool. I like that perspective. I definitely have been finding myself using more of these tools. Like, I use them in my meetings with clients because I do all my meetings online. Right. I have an AI tool that is there transcribing, so note taker, but then it ends up not only transcribing the whole meeting. I never read the whole transcript because it doesn't do it. It ends up sending me the summary, and then I can treat it like ChatGPT. And with the ChatGPT, like, I can treat it, ask it like, please give me the overall 10 takeaways for my client to read about and remember. And then I can really like, okay, please give me more detail, be more specific. So my client said this a little bit more. Please make sure that the client remembers this specific part and why.
That's brilliant. That's genius.
And it's listen, it's like there, it's like, and sometimes I will be in there, like, my client will be like, that was great, I need to remember that better. I was like, and I'll say the AI is called Sauna. I'll be like, Sauna, please make sure you caught that. Please make sure you caught. I think I said it like 3 times, and then I'll be like, there's a time in the meeting when I asked Sauna to catch the following moment. That's brilliant. Please give that moment back to me.
Yeah.
And then it'll quote it, and then my client will remember that exactly. So there's so much, like you said, but the AI in that moment would have not been able to be there if it wasn't for the conversation that I was having with my client.
Exactly. And it could always do. It's just like, think about it as it's a very perceptive and it's like a helper that has great memory, to be honest. It has memory on everything on the internet. It can connect dots very effectively, but it can only connect dots as so much as the dots have been connected in the body of work that it's making. Exactly. So
it's a great way to see it.
The same thing, but
it'd be cool to see how you bring it into, because I haven't brought it much into my newsletter yet. There's times, for example, when I'm running out of topics to write about because I have so much content potential in all my sessions with all my clients. I will ask the AI and that client, I'll be like, what was something that was more very powerful for my client in this meeting that could be used as a newsletter for my email list to benefit from as well. There's a couple times when I have a writer's block, as you called it, where I'll be like, I'll go to the AI, like, very last resort, and be, what's the one thing you'd recommend I could write about based on my client's reaction? And then the AI will give me like 4 potential options of like, your client really reacted really well here, thinking this was a powerful and mind-blowing moment for them.
Right.
They quoted this, and then they'll be like, you should write about that. That's like, I remember one of the articles I wrote about keeping the promises you make to yourself, that one that you love. That's something from, like, again, without the AI in that moment, it's just stuff that is very recurring in my life. So to go back to about the writer's block, I've noticed that if I really pay attention for a second, and either through journaling or just being very aware of what's been going on in my life, there's material surrounding me at every turn, every single turn. Like, there's times I can write about anything, even about this conversation right now. There's so much I could write about.
It's cool because, like, already the use cases that you use, I think, are very, very powerful. It takes a lot of advantage of what it can offer. I mean, AI is really good at suggesting stuff. So things like, we were reviewing your form that you were putting together earlier. Very simple to ask AI to give it. You give it some prompt, and you give it, but you need to give it what you want. And that's why also, like, kind of what we were talking about. My main feedback was like thinking about what you want to accomplish with this form. What are you trying to achieve out of it? Are you trying to generate more grow your user base? Are you trying to refine your newsletter and your content? And these are a lot of things. These are a lot of the prompts that you can give to an AI, and it can keep them all in mind. Yeah. Which is why I like to think of it as it's something that has a good memory, because very much when we brainstorm between humans, we're great at generating a bunch of ideas very quickly, but we're very good at forgetting them very quickly.
Yeah, so we don't write down.
The AI AI is really good at remembering it, so you can kind of count on that and give it a bunch of context, a ton of context, and a ton of different media, which you're doing already. But you can consider things like cross-referencing, for example, whatever Sana was picking up from your client interviews with the responses you're getting from the survey feedback, and seeing if it can derive any references, and it will do so because it has understanding of context between different words, and also it can also convert different media forms. It's harder for us to do effectively, and it's harder for traditional search engine tools or plugins that we do on our computer to do so because it's different formats. It can't combine text and speech and video at the same time. Modern AIs can do that. ChatGPT, you can pass it a bunch of different media formats. It extracts it using a bunch of different other tools, and then it combines the data into something that's powerful. It
is wild. I love how we went from music and festivals to now talking about AI and technology.
We're talking about two of my favorite things, man. Technology and music. I think it's there's a lot of
beautiful. No, but this is what I also love. Like we were talking about at the very beginning, we said, I wonder where it's going to go, the conversation. And this is what I love about not planning it, because people have asked me before, like, do you plan these podcast episodes and stuff? And I don't really. I already have a basis of every guest I've had so far has been somebody who I know somewhat well, that I don't have much of an idea where I'm going to go with it. And it's just, I've noticed how stuff ends up in the frame of what's been going on in someone's life, and both yours and mine. Right. Like you're talking about things that are directly related to things that you've been experiencing in your life. And like you're talking about, stuff that you're passionate about and you have a good perspective on it. And then the conversation gets filtered through that lens, and then it ends up leading us to the place where we end up being right now. Right. Which is so cool. Do you find that with your writing, and because you've been spending so much time writing, I know you mentioned that you did journal sometimes?
A little bit less lately, but yeah.
So do you feel that just writing, whether it's in the newsletters, whether it's on the journaling, whether it's any other kind of writing that you may do you find that it ends up affecting you in a positive way in other areas of your life?
It's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective. I think so, honestly. I'd say... So it's funny you're mentioning journaling. I picked it up briefly. I've journaled in very different occasions in my life. For a long time, I was journaling professionally. I had a professional journal and written down one where I would... write about what happened during the day, the lessons that I've learned professionally, the things
just only related to work.
Only related to work. For the longest time, for years, I have that. I think I have like 3 or 4 notebooks at home that are filled with.
Was that helpful?
And notes. Honestly, I think so. It's hard to say because, let's say, in the moment, it felt very gratifying because it felt like I was really committing that to memory to a certain extent, and it helped me kind of feel that I'm picking something up and learning and growing out of the experience. In retrospect, I'm not too sure. It's hard to tell what really stuck with me or not. And so that's why, when you ask me about the writing today, what it evokes, what it does, is it's still a bit of, there's these 2 elements that are important to me, is what it makes me feel during the moment, and what it makes me, and how it helps me grow, basically. How does that impact who I am in the future and later down the line? And when I've journaled personally was during times where things were a bit tougher. I had been recommended to journal as a means to kind of deal with some anxiety or some thoughts that are kind of intrusive and all that kind of thing. And it was that was very interesting because it defied a bit of that principle of it has to be both therapeutic during the moment and useful for long term. Because my biggest fear kind of from that perspective was to kind of look back on what I've written and feel embarrassed, ashamed, feeling, some kind of strange emotions about myself that wouldn't feel very positive. And so I just looked at it as something I would write and burn afterwards. And now, for instance, the newsletter that I write is kind of, I don't think as much about, I'm less self-conscious about that particular shame or impact that it might have for me in the future reading back into it. And so I'd say maybe the biggest impact it has is that, it helps boost my own self-confidence.
Interesting.
I feel a lot more comfortable writing and putting it out there, and so I feel a lot less judgmental by default. I'm not writing because I feel like anyone would, not just other people, but myself might look back at it and be like, crap, I was saying such stupid shit back then or whatever. On the contrary, I think I would see it as a perspective of, if I read something that I wrote, like the first newsletters after I've written 10 or 15, and if I pick out differences, I would feel very proud of myself to go from
you see the progress
or later. Exactly.
Man, so that's definitely a great perspective shift. But it's crazy. It was just all about a mindset shift. Like, it's really just that. You're choosing to see it in the other way versus the way you could have seen it before.
Right.
But that's so interesting. When you talk about it boosting your self-confidence, do you mean, this is now me speaking from my own experience, that because I've shown to myself how often I will keep, or I will mean what I say, like I will say, I have for example, my to-do list. I was showing you my to-do list today, right? And I was like, tomorrow it says, or yesterday it said for today, I have to write my newsletter for Saturday. Right. Because I write it because I release them twice. Right. I do Mondays, I write for Wednesday, so I can edit on Tuesday. On Thursday, I release for Saturday, so I can edit on Friday. Right? So today, Thursday, I was like, I have to write my newsletter today. Mm-hmm. But today was an odd day. Like, I know we have, like, you know, you're here, I have family here. Right. The festival, there's like different things going on. It's an odd day, so I have to make time for it. Mm-hmm. So do you, when you say about yourself, I feel my self-confidence boosting, do you feel it's boosting because, one, you're less judgmental with yourself and therefore more gracious, or two, and it could be both, or two, because when you're saying you're going to do something, you end up doing it, which ends up reinforcing your self-belief and yourself because you're doing the things you say you're going to do. Mm-hmm. Is it both? Just one of them? Maybe none?
A little bit of both, but I would say more the first one, in that it's an assurance, or rather it's derived of the, like, I would call the second one first. It's the idea that, like, I'm committing, or I'm thinking of doing something, right? And I'm thinking of challenging myself, and so I perform it, and then I get the confirmation that I'm able to do it.
There you go.
And I also get the confirmation, which kind of seems logical, but it's like, you know, nothing bad's gonna happen. No. Like, it's not the fear you get, the anxiety you get, or like the nervousness you get, is something we've all been familiar with since we've been children, right? Like, whenever you go on stage for the first time, or whenever you have to talk in front of your class for the first time, whatever kind of thing, you get nervous. And I don't know, for some reason when we were kids, we don't really overthink it. It's like, okay, you feel a little odd, but like, whatever, I'm still gonna do my thing. And there's some biological reasoning for it. There's a lot of, like, it's, you know, you can psychoanalysis, and like there's a lot of theories on why we get nervous and anxious in the first place. But over time, I think we've tried to rationalize it, and we've tried to also get rid of it to a certain extent. Yeah. We've started equating a lot of that, like, inner feeling, that gut feeling, as something that's bad, or something that, like, triggers a certain warning. But
yeah, how wild is that?
It's natural, in the sense that this is how we were built as human beings, to deal with our environments and to kind of listen to ourselves. Yeah. And probably what it's trying to tell you is, like, dude, you're doing something that you're doing for the first time, and you might be bad at it. And it's very possible you might be bad at it.
And it's totally fine.
And it's totally fine. But naturally, it's hard to feel like you're bad at something. There's effort that's going to be involved.
Because it hurts your ego.
And I think, and again, like, you know, I'm very pragmatic by the way that I think about things. There's also, you know, sort of the scientific approach of, like, there's a trade-off. Mm-hmm. Spending time learning something new is spending time doing something that you're really good at, for example, already. And so there's part of you that's trying to tell you, like, is it really worth putting yourself in that position to try something new and to really, like, potentially fail it if you could do something else on the side? And I don't think it's a bad. I don't see this as a bad thing. It's also what prevents us from, I don't know, like, doing dumb shit, like going down a super steep snowboarding hill, for example, right? Or, you know, for example, it's what prevents me from trying to do competitive basketball. Like, I'm not a very tall guy. I'm probably not going to be very good at competitive basketball.
You don't know that.
Sure, but, like, would I rather spend 5 years failing at basketball, or 5 years at being really good at writing, you know, about music, for example? Yeah. You see what I mean? And all that to say that, like, it first helps calibrate, because it's not an extreme. I don't see things as extremes, right? Like, I'm taking an extreme example because this is the extreme situation, but it helps me calibrate how much I'm willing to put myself out there for new experiences. Because at the same time, I'm also at the part of my life where we're talking about experimenting, about sticking to things a little bit longer. I want to start sticking to things a bit longer. I'm happy experimenting. I'm still at the age where I can do it, and there's still a lot to experience, and I want to still experience a lot. But I'm starting to get a sense of the things that I really like, and I'm starting to get a sense of the things that could be hard, but I still want to push forward with them. And so that means inherently taking time to do these things. And it wouldn't necessarily make me less happy to give up certain things. Just like, you know, for you, it didn't make you less happy to put a pause on the podcasting experience. It just meant that you were maybe happier, or you were dedicating that time for something else.
There you go.
And so all that to tie back to this idea of, like, the challenge. Do I feel better because I'm committing to something to myself? Yes, I feel better because I feel like I've committed to trying something new and I'm accomplishing it. And then and I'm revisiting this, and I feel better because I'm committing to keep moving forward with
There
it.
you go.
And I feel better because I'm building new skills, and because I realize that I can do stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things you said that are very golden, and I agree with many things. And I think the thing that definitely stood out to me was when you're saying about the thing, for example, the example you gave with the basketball, or like, should I take this very steep hill? Sometimes, although the choice may be a wrong one, you might as well find out. And that's what I've seen many people that they make, and many of my clients, the issues that they come to me for is because they have a decision paralysis.
Sure.
As a result, decision paralysis leads to action paralysis.
True.
And if it's an action paralysis, then there's no outcome. And then you don't get what you want. Mm-hmm. And that's why people end up staying in a place of desiring and of wanting and of longing, because they don't do anything. And they don't do anything because they haven't made a decision about what to do. Because they don't know what to do. Anyway, so you see the cycle.
Absolutely.
But what I'm trying to say is I agree that there's different periods of life, different ages, different circumstances, and as a result, depending on where you are, how old you are, and what you're doing in the world, sometimes you can't afford to experiment, like you're saying, to do it. But the thing that I guess gets me the most is when you see so clearly that the person is actually spending that time not doing anything because they're so paralyzed by the back and forth. Absolutely. And that's when sometimes, and this is my thing, what my dad taught me so many times, it's like, even when we were in Lebanon and we had to leave Lebanon, he's like, you make a decision, you stick to it.
Right.
Because if you know very well, we were going back and forth. Just it's another extreme example.
For sure.
Circumstances is crazy. Exactly. There's a war. There's emotions are hiding. There's family involved. You don't know what to do. And we should have made a decision once, stuck to it. We flip-flop 5 times. That's again extreme example, but it applies to everything. That when you don't decide anything, you keep limboing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You end up with decision paralysis and action paralysis. And that's what I think is so interesting, and why I admire that you ended up saying, you told me, you were like, yo, should I do a newsletter? I was like, you should. And then you did it. You didn't think of it more. And that's what's so beautiful about sometimes doing the things you say you're going to do, because it shows. That's why I harp so much on honoring and doing the things you're going to say you're going to do, because it builds your self-confidence. And then if you keep doing that with every little thing you do, even the most trivial things, like you saying, I'm going to make a drink for Julian, and then making it like you just did here for me right now. Even something so trivial and so small just shows to yourself, you're sending the signal to your brain that whatever you say, you're going to end up doing.
True.
So then what stops you from creating anything? Literally nothing, almost nothing, because you've shown it to yourself so much. Mm-hmm. And that's what, maybe we're going on a tangent now, but I just think it ties in very beautifully, because it's that. Look with your even with your newsletter. Even with your newsletter, like you've been able to now say you have a fucking newsletter. How many people can say they have a newsletter? How many people have you met?
Many. I mean, in this room, everyone, but we're particularly exceptional. And look, it's a joke, but not a joke either, because one thing that I would want to kind of pause on for a second is, you gave the example of what happened in Lebanon or something like that, right? And I would just nuance what you're saying, where like, in 80% or 90% of the cases, I would agree with your perspective that decision, or that just trying, is the best approach. But I will admit that something that feels a bit reductionary in the way that sometimes we communicate, or sometimes that we pass judgment on others sometimes, is that most often than not, we don't have the entire context of that person's life. Sure. We don't have the entire background. And I found myself in that very situation multiple times. I found myself so many times at work recently, in my personal life, thinking that someone maybe has, is angry at me, or has some prejudice about who I am, or has some kind of misunderstanding about a situation, when actually it had nothing to do with me, for example, or had nothing to do with the situation, and there's so much more happening. And so I would feel frustrated, for instance, to be giving advice to people, or trying to tell people, or trying to help people, and them not necessarily taking it, or feeling that they were stuck. And then there are 2 things I realized. One is that I'm not responsible for them necessarily. I want to help, and I want to support, but I'm not responsible. At the end of the day, I cannot be responsible, because I don't want to rob them from their power of making a decision. That's very important to me. Everyone has their own power to make a decision. They have their own prerogative to ask or listen to opinion or not, and then they make the choices at the end. And the second one is because obviously we're not in I can't be in that person's head. I don't know what their entire life is about. Maybe for them it's very, very hard to make that decision. Maybe for me it's easy, and vice versa. And so that's the only thing where I feel like understanding and having that level of empathy sometimes helps even more, being a good friend, being a good person, being a professional, just so you can at least try to see how far you can really help someone, how far you can really support them. And by reminding them that, you know, this is what you feel you can do, this is what you feel like with some external push, and we all need sometimes an external push, just like I need an external push from you being like, yo, should I start a newsletter? I probably maybe subconsciously made the decision, but I just needed a little bit of a push, and so I could go for it.
Yeah.
And sometimes things are more complicated, and it's hard, and that's normal, and it takes time. And I know for myself in these situations, when I found that things are not straightforward, more often than not, I felt a lot better with people simply being by my side. They didn't have to tell me what to do. They didn't have to try to push me to act. They didn't have to, you know, provoke any situation. Just being by my side and reminding me that, you know, whatever you do, I'll be, you know, whatever, I can help. I understand this is hard for you. Take the time you need. That's also something that, at least in my 20s, I had a lot of time grasping, is that, like, I don't have to rush to do things right away. We're lucky enough to have time. We're lucky enough to you know, to be in a society where, you know, life expectancy is up to like 90, 100 or whatever. So we have all the time to try things. But yeah, sorry, it's a bit of a tangent, but it's
beautiful.
It's a strong. What you say, I think, is very powerful, because we're finding ourselves as a society and as people wanting to help each other out, wanting to really contribute and help each other out and support. But I feel like, again, to me, it's like sometimes the consequence of the internet or the access to information that we have that's very narrow, it prevents us from understanding a more general context, and it makes us jump to conclusions and think that we understand people when we just should dig a bit longer, just spend a bit more time with them and be a bit more patient and be open to these perspectives.
You just hit the key to, or the secret weapon to making human relations and many things in life work better. One of the key words that stood out to me was misunderstanding. I really believe that a lot of the reason why things don't work out in relationships, in life, in business, and everything is because of misunderstandings. Like you said, we can't. I don't know if people don't grasp this, but we can't view the world directly. Like, we see things through our own lens, our own circumstances. Like, somebody once gave me the analogy of, like, we have our own fertilizers in our own water, which is our own upbringing, our environment, our context, right? And we all have our own garden to mend and nurture and take care of. And therefore, with that comes our own unique fertilizer and our own unique water.
That's cool. It's
a cool analogy, right?
Yeah,
that really stuck with
This is the caipirinha a little bit.
Karim is like a little bit of a bartender, a little bit of an engineer, a writer, a little bit of everything. What are you not?
I don't know. A podcast host, for one.
Yeah, maybe.
Yet.
Be careful with your language. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is, and please remember what we were talking about. I got lost now.
About misunderstandings.
Oh, misunderstandings. Thank you. And that's what I'm saying is, people think that when I say that about misunderstandings, like I told a client that once, and they were like, oh, so I just need to forgive this person because they had a misunderstanding about the situation. That's why they handled me wrongly. I said, no, but at least it gives yourself grace, because usually when people do something wrong, like they're not there for you in the ways you wanted them to be for you when you're 20s, who ends up carrying the blame? Who ends up carrying the burden? You. Why? Because you're holding, like, why was that? You make it personal. You make it about you, which is exactly what you're talking about. When it's not. When the person was uninformed, the person was unaware. They had a misunderstanding of the situation because they just did not view the world in the way that you view it. Am I making sense?
100%.
And this is what I feel, again, so much easier said than done. Yes, I hear you. But if you can just remind yourself, and I know for me in my own relationships, even with Hannah, in that romantic relationship, or with any human dyadic relationship, I remind myself of, and sometimes it's just a quick catching of yourself of in the moment of, okay, this person has had a whole different upbringing. This person has had a whole different environment. This person has a whole different life currently. As a result, the way that I see things is not the way they're going to see it. End of story. But for people, it's like you said, there's ego that comes into it. There's fear, insecurity.
Impatience sometimes is
that's the key word. I would agree.
Ready to, we want things to happen now, and we want things to happen like instantaneously. We want other people to understand us right away. It takes time. One of my good friends said once something along the lines of, "Don't mistake malice with ignorance. Essentially, most people that think that someone is being malicious or painful or hurtful is just someone who is ignorant. Uninformed, ignorant. Sometimes, well, I think his point was don't confuse malice with incompetence. But anyways,
same thing.
I would adjust it by saying, most of the time it's someone who doesn't really know, and so it's very easy to make to draw connections when you don't have the entire path, when you don't realize that you need to go around instead of a straight line to connect the dots.
And how crazy is that?
It's crazy, but it's the reality, and that's where I feel like knowing and acknowledging that, and not necessarily, I spent a lot of my thinking time and a lot of my life, to be honest, pondering certain things that are unfair in the world. Right? We all find ourselves doing that, especially if we come from a place of privilege, because we feel like we don't understand. Right? Like we're lucky to be that things are so easy for us, and we're like, shit, like why can't it be easy for others? And sometimes it's a bit of pretension, but most of the time it's also realizing that the question is not why is it that way, is how do you navigate the world, and how do you as a person express yourself and be who you want to be inside of a world that is unequal, that is going to have situations where there's going to be misunderstandings. And my conclusion is, which side do you want to be? Do you want to be on the side that kind of goes with the flow, or do you want to be on the side of the person who acknowledges that there are issues and who tries to kind of work towards
and do something about
facilitating things?
Yeah, and I like the way you said that, and I mean, I have so much, so I don't have much to say about that, because I was gonna say I have so much to say about it, but it's more I love the way you distilled it, and it's reminded me of so many things. One of the things it reminded me of was when someone told me about biases, and how when you have biases in life, it's very similar. And when the bias is there, it's the reality. Either you do nothing and then confirm the bias, or do something and fight against it, and then you come out as a hero. And not that the hero is the point of it, but it's just a much better story there, and you did something against it. Like that's what it reminded me of when I heard you say that.
Absolutely.
But it's so interesting to me, everything that we've talked about, specifically this last part. I really am. It's a big point for me. Again, going back to the misunderstandings, but again I love what you said about the people being uninformed or unaware, and then seeing it as you said incompetent or innocent. Because the example that the coach I work with, the one who's coaching me, he told me once, we're talking about self-image, and his framework around self-image was that think about a baby or think about a little puppy, right? If they exactly, like think about Molly as a little puppy. If she right now is here and pooping everywhere all over the house, are you gonna hit her? Are you gonna be mean with her?
Fuck no.
You're gonna see her as she's just a little baby, right? Just a little baby. Right. Same if right now we had a little baby, an actual baby human here, and they're sitting and they start
barfing.
Thank you. like
throwing up,
barfing, just in front of you or on you. Are you going to hit them?
No.
You're going to see them as?
Baby.
Innocent.
Ooh.
You see what I'm trying to say?
Good one. Yes.
And this is what I've learned for self-image that is so beautiful, is we all have parts of ourselves that we either don't love, that we want to change, that we want to improve on, which is all great and all fine, and that's great. Like you said, we learn things, we realized we had misunderstandings, and we realized that we were unaware of many things. Well, you either have two choices here. Like I said, either sit down, do nothing, wallow in it, and regret, and then do nothing. Action paralysis. Or fight against the bias. And what you can do instead is treat and see the parts of yourself that you want to change as innocent. Like you would with that baby.
Right.
Because that's the only way that you can be gracious. That's the only way you can be non-judgmental. And as a result, when you're non-judgmental and you're gracious, what happens? You can let go. People are not able to let go of those things they don't like about themselves or about others, because ego comes into it, judgment comes into it, and there is a points of contention that arise, right? Because ego feeds on what? On fear, on worry, on insecurities. So when those things are alive and they're festering, and are you going to be able to let it go? No, it's festering. Festering means you're not letting go, by definition.
Cool.
So what do you think of that?
Man, mic drop, brother. No, it's I like it a lot. It definitely helps. I'd say it's fun. It's interesting because it does remind me again about your the latest newsletter that you have, or the one that resonated a lot with me around I didn't want to pet Molly because you said that she would stay the entire time. But
I know, but she's
now
too
I
cute
regret
not
it.
to
She's
pet.
way too cute not to pet. It's so hard. No, but it's cool because I could definitely see another sort of part of my experience where I could treat others in a certain way with some grace and some tolerance and patience, and a little less of myself. It's like, I know I found myself very often criticizing my judgment or behavior by kind of presenting it as I should know better, or I should have known how to behave in that certain way, or why am I doing it?
If you would have, you would have done it.
And that's totally fair, and I like the perspective of saying that, like, well, I guess just assume that you didn't know, and that's okay because it was a new experience, it was new, whatever.
Yeah.
Just like you would give the benefit of the doubt to someone else, you should give the benefit of the doubt to yourself.
There you go.
And I like that.
Yeah.
I like being able to build mental models. I know you're very familiar with Naval Ravikant. He talks about building mental models, and it's a great way to keep your brain stimulated and to also help simplify certain things in life. Simplify in the good sense of things, where it's like it allows you to kind of navigate life without overthinking certain concepts. And the mental models that I appreciate a lot are the ones related to kind of treating people like you would treat yourself. And it's funny because I would always see it in one way, which is I would treat others well because I would want people to treat me, but this is the other way around as well. Is I treat myself well so I can treat the others well.
That is so crazy. I spoke today with my client. The question I always ask her is, what would be different if you treated yourself the way you treated others? She was like, well, I would be feeling much better.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'd be doing much better.
Exactly.
So then why don't we?
Yeah, why don't we?
Because like you said, there's this part of us that feels like we have to always serve and help other people because we want it in return, reciprocity. We want to be looked good. Part of the way the world works is we want to be seen as good people, favored, accomplished, helpful, serviable, etc., etc. And but with ourselves, it's who's the person that's seeing that about ourselves with ourselves, us. But people don't realize that it has a way more powerful effect on you, because if you can be that way with yourself, then you're building your self-content. You're building your self-esteem. You're building your self-perception, your self-concept, which as a result ends up allowing you to show up in the world for other people in much better ways as well.
Someone I admire a lot once told me something along the lines of like, I was talking about, feeling like I wasn't doing good enough in a certain perspective, or feeling like I was reacting in a way that wasn't ideal, whatever. And she was telling me, she's like, well, do you feel like I do this perfectly, or do you feel like I'm perfect? And I'm like, no. And she was like, well, does that bother you? I'm like, no, not at all. So then why does it bother you that you're not perfect? Why does it bother you so much that you don't, behave exactly the way you're supposed to? If you accept other people's imperfections, why don't you accept your own? It was quite powerful.
Wow. But that's exactly what I mean when I say about looking at it with gracious and non-judgmental ears and perspectives. And that's what, if there's one thing I'd encourage you and everybody listening, is whenever, with yourself specifically and other people, but with yourself, as we're talking about ourselves now, is whenever you feel like you're doing not enough and you feel like you could be doing more, and you feel like there's so much out there still that you are left to do, ask and see, where is the opportunity for me to be non-judgmental? Where's the opportunity for me to be gracious with myself? Right? Where is the misunderstanding? Right? And I really think that's gonna, for me at least, it was a huge change. And maybe it's something to write about in my next newsletter.
Ooh.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe it'll be cool for you to see if you can tie in self-development and more things in your life into the music realm of things. I'd be curious to see. That could be a good challenge for you.
I could try. I'll admit, I like the fact that it's very light, or rather than it's.
I agree.
I guess I won't call it light. I call it technical.
Okay.
And that's one thing about me. I feel like it's what draws me to a lot of like what I call the sciences and technology and that kind of stuff, is because it has this sort of very kind of sobering and logical aspect to it. And I think that's why I'm enjoying, we're back to the first topic, enjoying writing these newsletters a lot, is because I'm able to address it from a sort of a rational and logical perspective, something that is very emotional to me. And it's very cool. But no, I think it's probably giving me some food for thought in terms of like how to structure the perspective around the newsletters, seeing how I think because the thing that's important for me in the newsletter is two things. Is one, I want to be able to share. I want to be able to give a glimpse to my personality a little bit. I think that's I feel like it feels good. It's just like,
for sure.
It sounds stupid, but that's just how people like to post on Instagram. Sometimes I would criticize it, but at the end of the day, if it makes you feel good about yourself and it makes you feel like appreciated, do it. Like I'm not pissed about it. Yeah. So I'm do the same here. But the other thing is, I really want to also, highlight the great work and art that other people are doing. I think that's very important to me because I feel like, again, like we're in a society that has so much information about so many things, and a lot of the cool stuff gets drowned out. And I did that a little bit with one of the newsletters I wrote about Billie Eilish's last album, Hit Me Hard and Soft, and I know a lot of her art is derived from her own experience. And that's an angle that I feel I could probably take or kind of derive, or at least point the attention there.
Which is why people sorry for interrupting you, but it's why people are so feel connected to her.
100%. You can read a lot about a person, and you can feel a lot, as you said, connected and less alone, and like you're sharing from listening to someone's music and understanding where it comes from,
or any piece of content or art.
Piece of content.
Which is why a lot of any content, whether it's newsletters, videos, podcasts, any piece of content, everybody encourages you. It's at the end of the day, like what I'm building is a personal brand,
100%.
The word personal, personality. So anyway, that's definitely what I would encourage you for food for thought, and we'll talk more about it. But I definitely feel like the great angle you should take is to see what ways can I include more of my personality to myself in it.
I like it.
Because then what differentiates your review from the next person's, right? And it's your personality, but something that nobody else can take away from you. It's you. It's your insights, your perspectives. But now that we're on topic of music, I just want to, I know we're shorting up on time and we got to head soon for dinner and then for the festival.
I'm excited.
I love that we started with music and now we're going to end it with music.
Nice.
The question I ask every single guest when they depart from the couch is related to music.
Okay.
I have, like, as you know, we have a big passion of music in this family.
Certainly do.
And therefore what I want to know is, what is one song right now that is arising in this moment as I'm bringing it up to you that you would love to share with our listeners tonight? It'll be the outro of the podcast, so the first 30 seconds we'll play. What's coming up right now as I'm asking you to share a song? What's rising for you at this moment?
Ooh la la la. There's the one that's like, it's playing in my head right now, and it came out a little bit out of nowhere. It's a French song.
Ooh, interesting.
By a singer called Clara Luciani.
Okay.
And she collaborated with a band called La Femme, who does some really cool, kind of old school vibey music. She has a really kind of deep voice, and the song is called Amour Toujours.
Amour
It's very
Toujours.
French, very romantic. It's a bit about the intemporality of love, or the ephemerality of love, and about how we make it out to be this thing that's supposed to last forever, but actually, and so the lyrics are Amour toujours, mais pas trop longtemps, which means love always, but not for too long. I don't know why it resonates. I feel like it's got a bit of this ephemeral aspect to it. The music is fantastic. Like the vibe itself is great. It sounds like a 70s, 60s, 70s like disco music.
I'm so excited to hear it.
It's really cool. I like it a lot.
Beautiful.
Hope the viewers will appreciate it.
So we're listening to
Amour toujours by Clara Luciani.
Amour toujours. Karim, thank you so much for being here. We're going to do more and more parts, so we have way more to talk about, huh?
Anytime.
Much love, man. Thank you.
Cheers.
Les repas sont des îlots faits pour deux, des châteaux